What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Therapy on Two Wheels. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not the KLR 650 is a great beginner bike. Let's jump into it. So I've been asked by quite a few people, is the KLR 650, this new Gen 3 model, this one here is the 2023, it's the adventure model, is it a good beginner's bike? You know, I'm going to give you some of the good first or reasons why it is, and then I'll also give you some reasons why it might not be. The first one is that it has fairly low power and torque, which is good for beginners. You don't want to give a beginner a high-powered bike with a ton of torque. They'll twist the throttle way too hard and it's just going to take off. This one, I'm in third gear here, twist the throttle and it's got some torque, but it's not overpowering to where I'm falling off the back of the bike, which will happen with some other bikes out there, especially some 600s, some 1000s, the sport bikes. It's pretty easy to throw yourself off that bike if you whiskey throttle it. With this one, not too bad, not too much torque, not too much power. If you're looking at something, you know, you're getting into adventure riding, you're looking at the BMW GS 1250, the new one, that has over 3.5 times as much power and almost 3 times as much torque. So comparatively, yeah, this bike compared to a BMW GS 1250, it is a very manageable beginner bike. The next thing I'll say is that it's easy to maneuver while you're riding. So for this bike, for an adventure bike, it's fairly nimble. You know, it does have that 21-inch front tire, so you're not going to be leaning into corners like you would on a sport bike or a naked bike. But if you're a beginner, you're typically not going to be doing that type of riding anyways. You're just getting familiar with the controls, with just being on top of a bike instead of in a car if you're used to driving a car. It's a very different feeling. So there's a lot of things that you have to focus on, and you don't want to have to worry about, is my bike going to be able to make this turn? You feel very confident at pretty much any turn at any speed with this bike, as long as you're not going too fast into a corner. Like for this one, it does say 15 miles per hour on this turn. I know I've taken this road a bunch of times. I can go 30 here easily, no problems on this bike. Sport bike, you can probably go 40. So it's just very maneuverable through these types of roads. This bike is also very comfortable in the seating position. If you're a newer rider, you don't want to be cramped up. You probably don't want a small little sport bike if you're 6'6". It's just not going to be a comfortable ride for you. But this thing, I have plenty of room. I'm 6'2". My knees are not anywhere crunched up. I have plenty of room for my legs. My back and my butt feel fine on this stock seat. You know, you really don't need anything better than this seat. So for that and comfortability while you're riding, I'd say it's great for a beginner. Another good thing about using the KLR 650 as a beginner bike is you can see over a lot of cars in traffic, especially here. Like I can stand up on this bike and I'm going to be taller than most, if not all, SUVs out there, and I can see far ahead to see if there's any type of accident, if there's a backup, or just to see what's going on ahead of me, to be able to see brake lights if you're on the freeway. It does give you a very tall riding position compared to something like a sport bike where you'd be like this and you can barely see through your windshield. This gives you plenty of visibility. It makes you very comfortable. And it's more similar if you are coming from driving a car to riding a bike. It's a little bit easier transition compared to going on something like a short sport bike. Another good thing for the beginners market is that you can find a lot of these bikes used for pretty affordable prices. You know, you have some of the ones that are the older models, like a 2010 to 2015. You can find those sometimes for $2,500, $3,000. This model here, a 2023, you probably find them for around $4,500, $5,000 on the used market, with fairly low miles too. So for a beginner rider, I would highly suggest not going out and buying a bike new at a dealership. You're probably going to drop it. And you don't want to be dinging up a brand new bike, especially something like this where you're going to take it off-road. There's a very good chance that you will be dropping this bike at some point. You know, it does have some of the features like the big bar ends on the side here. I've dropped this bike twice, both at low speeds. Once was in a deep patch of sand that I hit. It's going maybe 8 miles an hour, just tipped over to the side. And then another time, I forgot that my disc brake lock was on and tried to take off, and it tipped right over. So for used bikes, that's what you want as a newer rider. Do not go out and buy a brand new bike as a new rider, because more than likely you're going to get bored of whatever bike that is if it's lower powered, and you're likely going to drop it at some point, just being inexperienced with being on a motorcycle. Another good thing for beginner riders is this is a very reliable bike, and it's easy to fix if there are any problems. The regular maintenance is easy to do yourself. Everything's very accessible. It does have a center stand, so it's easy to put this bike up and be able to do basic maintenance on it. So for that, you don't want a bike that's going to have a bunch of issues, especially you don't want something from 1970 as your first bike that you're going to have to be wrenching on the entire time. Instead of just learning to ride the bike, it's going to be sitting in your garage and you're going to have to be working on fixing it. So for that reason, I'd say it's a good beginner bike because it is reliable. You'll have very few issues with it, especially the newer fuel injected models. And also, it's going to be cheap to fix. Now, for the bad things that I would say a newer rider should not get this bike, here's some of those reasons. The first one is that this is not for shorter riders. If you're, I'd say 5'6" or under, I wouldn't even look at this bike. They do have the S model of this bike, which lowers the seat to, I think it's 31 inches, compared to this one's 34.3. For me, I'm 6'2", have about a 33-inch inseam roughly. I'm not flat-footing this bike. My heels are still off the ground. So if you're maybe 5'10", 5'11" with long legs, you'll be about the same. Anybody that's probably 5'8", 5'9", or shorter, you're going to be leaning to one side when you come to a stop with this bike. There's no way you're putting both feet down. And if you're 5'5", 5'6", there's going to be a huge lean in that bike. And if you're on an angle, like a sloped angle, it's going to be very difficult to keep that bike up when you come to a stop. Now, another reason that it might not be great for beginner riders is that it's not the best choice for off-roading. So if you are looking for a bike and you're looking to do the majority of your miles off-road, you're not going to get a great experience on this bike. This bike is meant to do kind of 50-50 off-roading and on-road. But if you're planning on just doing technical trails all the time, look at a dirt bike, or look at a much smaller dual sport that's only 250, 300 pounds. This bike off-roading is good, but you're not going to be going off jumps. You're not going to be going up super steep inclines with it. Unless you're a very experienced rider, I would not suggest this bike if you're looking to do basically all off-road riding. As a 480-pound bike for the adventure model, it is fairly top heavy, and it's not bad when you're on the bike. It gives you great maneuverability, but when you're off the bike and you're trying to maneuver it around, whether it's in your garage, your parking space, wherever you're doing this, it can be very difficult to maneuver because it just wants to constantly lean over to the side because it's top heavy. So you do want to make sure that you are at least capable of maneuvering this big of a bike. If not, I would go something that is much smaller and much lighter to start out with, so you get used to maneuvering a bike and you don't have a 500-pound bike that's going to be falling on top of you at any point in time. And that leads into the next one, which if you do drop this bike, it's kind of hard to pick up. If you're on flat ground like this in this neighborhood, not generally too bad. But if you are on, let's say, a slope, whether it's a road that's sloped, or if you're off-roading and you're on a steep incline, you drop this bike, it is going to be very, very difficult for you to pick it up. Even for me at 6'2", 200 pounds, I think I'm fairly strong or average strong, it's still hard for me to pick up this bike. And technique does have a lot to do with it, but when you're on sand on an incline and you're trying to pick this bike up and it's 500 pounds, yeah, it's not an easy task, especially by yourself. Another reason that you would not want to get this bike as a beginner's bike is if you're looking to go at higher speeds, or you're going to be doing highway miles a lot, kind of looking for a commuter bike, this can do it, but you'd probably be more comfortable on something else that has a little bit more power, or something where you can learn on that has low enough power but grow into. So something like a 400 or even a tame 600 naked bike, where you can not whiskey throttle it. It'll work with very low throttle response, but you can build yourself into that bike. If you're looking for something with a lot of power out of the gate, this is fun torque in second, third gear, but it's not going to go those higher speeds that you're looking for. And the last point that I'm going to make is that this is an expensive bike to purchase new. So going back to my previous point of looking at these on the used market, do not go out and buy a brand new $8,000 bike, again, knowing that you're going to be probably dropping this bike. So there are my tips of whether or not this is a good beginner bike. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.